Good morning, everybody. I'm Rick Myers. I'm from Woodcrest Villa. Thank you for joining us in our series. And last week we talked about real estate. This week we have our good friend Margaret Novak with us. And Margaret is a colleague, but also a personal friend. She has helped me move and made it very easy. And what's great about Margaret, she and her husband also moved to a retirement community in the Philadelphia area. So she knows what she's talking about. She also wrote a book, Squint. I always want to say Squirt, but it's Squint. Talk with great stories about the next phase of our lives. So with that, I'll introduce Margaret. Oh, one housekeeping, we're going to have quick Q&A at the end. And what we'll do, raise your hand if you have a question. I have someone here helping us with the technology, and then also with unmuting yourself so you can ask the question. So with that, go ahead, Margaret. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. I came to the world of moving and downsizing about 25 years ago when I left my corporate job and started a business called Moving Solutions. And the goal of the business was to help people downsize and relocate, usually to senior living communities. Some of my friends probably wondered if the business would survive, but we were filling an unmet need. It was the right business at the right time, and we thrived and grew. I received awards from national organizations, and we had a lot of press. And soon people were calling us saying, how do we start businesses like this? And from that grew the National Association of Specialty and Senior Move Managers. I became NASM's first president, and today there are members around the country. So if you find that you could benefit from the services of a move manager, no matter where you live, there will be people who excel in helping you downsize, find solutions for things that aren't going with you. Fast forward 25 years, I succeeded in selling my business, and my husband and I bought a home by the shore. It was our dream home. And we wanted to have lock and go. We wanted to be able to get to the house easily. So we decided to move to a senior living community. We were going to downsize our belongings so we could upsize our lives. It was the perfect reason to move. It was the perfect time to move. About 6 weeks before our planned move, my husband had planned hip replacement surgery, which went really well. And the next day, he had a massive heart attack. For a while, we didn't know if he was going to live. We didn't know if he would be a candidate for surgery. I never considered not moving forward with the move because he couldn't return to our 3-story stone colonial. But now I had 3 dogs and a husband on oxygen, a walker because of his hip replacement surgery, and a man who was really sick. And we moved. In a literal heartbeat, we went from moving under the best of circumstances to moving under the worst of circumstances. So when I look back, I can say, here I was, the queen of downsizing. How did my move go? Well, I want to fast forward and let you know that my husband had open heart surgery. He did remarkably well and he's fine. But a lot of things made the cut that shouldn't have. And as I look at them, I see themes. One theme is rationalization. Like I looked at a 30-cup coffee urn and said, I might make a big party when I move to the senior living community. Never mind that I hadn't had that kind of party in 7 years. I rationalized that I might need it. Another theme was procrastination. We were going to take 1 hose because we have an outside garden. But I had 5 hoses just to pick through. It would have taken a few minutes, but I procrastinated. So on move day, I just put them all in a trash bag and told the movers, take everything. One theme was being logical. like taking a lot of lamps. Our old house was dark and faced north, but our new cottage faces south and it's more modern. There's lots of overhead lighting. So although we've been here for a year and a half, we've yet to turn most of our lamps on. And there they are next to my husband's recliner, fighting for space amidst an iPad, cough drops, 15 pairs of glasses, 6 remotes, and a box of Kleenex. It made sense to bring the lamps, but it doesn't make sense to keep them. Some things made the cut that were illogical, like a mesh bag of old pantyhose. I don't know about you, but I'm never wearing pantyhose again the rest of my life. I don't know how they survived in my closet, yet alone got here. Some things made the cut because I was being pragmatic, like 4 boxes of photo albums. The first thing my husband said when we decided to move was, let's sort through the photos. And I said no, because if we're really effective, we'll reduce 4 albums to 2, and it will take a lot of time. In that same time, I can take care of 60 cartons of other stuff that I don't want to have go with this, that is way less emotional. That's why 4 cartons of photo albums came to our new home, but 60 cartons of other stuff from our basement did not. And the last category of things that made the cut that maybe shouldn't have were things that were emotional, like a service for 16 of my mother's Rosenthal china. It had been her pride and joy, but it has a floral pattern that means it can't go in the dishwasher, and a gold rim that means it can't go in the microwave. For 40 years since my mom died, I kept those dishes packed in the basement. And then I moved and they were packed in my garage. And now I wonder, have I really honored my mother by keeping dishes packed for 40 years? So instead, just recently, I found a nonprofit thrift shop whose purpose my mother would really support. And I donated those dishes, and someone who really loves them and who wants to use them will get them. And something my mother will feel good about is going to benefit from those proceeds. So how was my move? It was really imperfect. There was rationalization and procrastination. There were things that were logical and illogical. There was things that were pragmatic and some decisions that were emotional. But in the big picture, it didn't matter. We got here and we're moving on and enjoying our life. So I learned some important lessons. One, don't wait until your downsizing is perfect to move. Downsizing doesn't have to be perfect. Whatever arrives that you will take care of later or not. But don't postpone a decision that's right for you because downsizing isn't 100% perfect. And don't postpone the decision to move until the timing is perfect. Our timing was perfect, and then it was awful. But we're glad that we're here. I realize that when we postpone decisions, waiting for perfect time, we're also postponing experiences and connections that could help us thrive. So I've learned not to wait for perfection. It's overrated. And I moved to plan B with more enthusiasm because often plan B is the better plan. That's the story of my move. Very imperfect, but we're here. I learned other things when I moved. I thought of other things. We're really happy when our kids say they would like to take something. And we offer them things, and often I hear my kids don't want it, but sometimes they do, and that makes us very happy usually. So I heard a story from one of my clients, and she said she had a burled mahogany highboy. It had a beautiful burled pattern, but it was bigger in scale than she wanted for her new home. So she offered it to her kids, and she was thrilled when her daughter said that she wanted it. So she had it shipped to her daughter, and a few months later went to visit and went up to the granddaughter's bedroom to see the highboy, and there it was, painted blue. And her reaction was, oh my God, how could you paint a burled mahogany? And then she realized she had to zip it, that she had given it away. And that is such a natural response. We give things away literally, but we don't really relinquish them emotionally. And here we're happy that a family member will take them. But if we hold on to things, if we give gifts with strings, they could result in a lot of resentment. It's the opposite of what we want to have happen with things that we don't even care to keep. So it is wonderful to offer things to family members and wonderful when they accept them. I know that when we accepted things from our parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles, we probably had expectations laid upon us. And most of us probably accepted that responsibility to care for that item, to keep it in good condition, whether it was something fancy like dishes or even something more ordinary. But I think we could be the last generation that is controlled by guilt that way. I think that our children will not hesitate to sell, paint, donate, or get rid of things that we give them. So it's wonderful to offer things to your kids. Make sure we're not attaching emotional strings to them. And don't be surprised if our kids dispose of them, donate them, or whatever. I also learned that sometimes I had a hard time with emotional items and realized that maybe in worrying about the item, I was safeguarding the wrong thing. I thought about my mother's cake plate. I mentioned that my mom passed away when I was young. I was 27. And one of the things that I got from my mother that I always liked was a plain glass cake plate. It wasn't etched glass or cut glass. It was very simple, but she used it often and it became my go-to cake plate after she passed away. So one day, about 10 years ago, I went to a party and made a cake. So I put it on that cake plate. And there was a lot of cake left on the plate. So I said to the hostess, don't worry, I'll come by some other day and pick up the cake plate. Well, the next day, I get a phone call. Hi, Margaret, please tell me this cake plate wasn't a family heirloom. I said, well, it belonged to my mom and it was one of my favorite things. Dead silence on the phone. And then I said, but my mom is in my heart and my mind, not in a cake plate. Well, what was I going to say? It was pretty clear the cake plate was kaput. But as soon as I said it, I realized it was true. My kids never met my mother. That cake plate would never mean to them what it meant to me, but I realized something way more important. My mom came to this country from Hungary when she was 12. She didn't know English, so they put her back a year in school where she could learn it. When she was 16, at the height of the Depression, she contracted TB and she spent a year in a sanitarium. When she got out of the sanitarium, she was another year behind and never finished high school. I didn't just grow up knowing that I was going to go to college. I grew up knowing how much it bothered my mother that she didn't have an education. She would say, after meeting the parents of my friends, I know that I don't have the education they do, but I think I'm just as smart. It bothered her so much. And she was so smart. We loved discussing literature together. If I was reading Willa Cather's How Green Was My Valley, I would get a copy for her and she would read it. Or My Antonia. If I read Le Petit Prince in French, I got a copy in English and we laughed with it, and we cried with it. And if I wanted my children to understand who she was and what my relationship with her was like, they're not going to understand that from looking at a cake plate. I need to tell those stories. So I realized that maybe I was safeguarding and creating safe passage for the wrong thing. Maybe what I need to pass on isn't the cake plate, but the stories of who she was. It's really the story. And some stories are poignant. Some stories are hilarious. And they're wonderful. And they become what is passed on and retold over and over. And they don't need the object. A woman told me that many decades ago, she met her to-be husband home to meet her parents. And it was the first time he was meeting them, and he was very nervous. She also said that her mother had a lovely brass bowl, a large bowl, and it was her mom's pride and joy. She kept it very highly polished and kept it on a sideboard in the dining room. So there they are, her to-be husband meeting her parents for the first time. He's really nervous. And her mom has cooked calf's liver for dinner. And I remember eating that as a child. Maybe it's not very common now. I think it was more common years ago. And this combination of calf's liver and nerves did not work well for the young man. And during dinner, he got greener and greener. And when it became clear that he was imminently going to throw up, the woman grabbed the first thing she could find, and it was the brass bowl. So her to-be husband always, now they tell the story how he vomited into her mother's prized possession at the first meeting. Decades went by, her mother kept the bowl. And then her mom passed away, and this woman and her sister were sorting through her mother's belongings. And the woman said, "Where's mom's brass bowl?" And the sister said, "I don't know. Mom must have gotten rid of it." And she said, "Do you feel bad that you don't have that because it's such a big part of your history?" And the woman laughed and said, "I never had the bowl. It was always at mom's, but I had the story. And that story has been retold over and over again. It's part of our family lore. We laugh every time. I don't need the bowl to have that wonderful story." And I love when she shared that with me, because even the stories that are part of the families love to retell that have a thing in them, they help you realize you don't need the thing. I've thought about that recently because many years ago, when I was in my 30s, before I got married, I took a trip to the Caribbean with a girlfriend, also single. And I went to the gift shop and I bought a coffee mug. And it was nothing fancy. I came home and I put pencils in it, and I kept it for decades. And it was just an ordinary thing. And you know, in the Velveteen Rabbit, the ordinary rabbit becomes real because of over time, because of what he was in that little boy's life. Well, about 8 years after that trip, the woman I went on the trip with at 37 years old contracted aggressive breast cancer, and 18 months later, she died. When I was 39, I got breast cancer. But here I am 31 years later, alive and well. And when I look at that mug full of pencils, what I see is not a mug, but I realize how serendipitous life is. Why was I so fortunate? I have had a family and children and a life and a legacy, and Karen so unfortunate. It's hard to make sense of it. But that mug became a symbol to me of being thankful and grateful and mindful of what I have. But when I moved recently, I realized that I didn't need to have that physical mug anymore. I had internalized that gratitude and that mindfulness. It was the item was my bridge to getting there. But I no longer need a thing to know how lucky I am or to be grateful. So I look at these stories and do I have a favorite about how people downsize? I think I do. And it's from two sisters who were sorting through their parents' belongings. And they agreed on everything they were parting with, except for two items. One was a ring that their mother had purchased. It wasn't the wedding ring or the marriage ring or engagement ring. And one was a silver vase that her mom had gotten at an auction. And they both sisters wanted both items. And the way they resolved it is that each took one item, and every year on New Year's Day, they get together and the person with the vase returns it with a dozen white roses, which were their mom's favorite flower, and they switch. And I love how they have resolved this because they put relationship above ownership. And I especially love the message that they are giving to their own children of how to resolve differences when you look at belongings, that relationship is more important than ownership. In the way they have dealt with their mother's things, they have created a legacy for their children that enriches how their children will grow up and deal with belongings after these two sisters pass away. So how we deal with things has power. It's not just what we're doing with them. It sends a message to our children and to family members of what is the right way. And that's why the way these two sisters handled this has become, I think, my favorite story in the book, because they created legacy for the future. So those are some of my favorite stories. And I'm wondering if there are any thoughts about them or some other issues that you'd like to see me talk about. Well, I want to share a story about something that can illustrate how divvying up things can go wrong. After my mom passed away, I got everything that I wanted. But for some reason, I also cared about what happened to the things that I didn't want. And in particular, I was upset about who was going to get my mother's blue sofa. And my brother wanted it, and I didn't think he would take care of it. Now, I have to share that my brother and I already didn't have a good relationship. And in my years as a senior move manager, what I often saw is that whatever the relationship was that siblings had became the predictor of how they handled things in divvying up belongings. Siblings that got along well were able to sort out differences, and siblings that already had friction replayed that friction when it came to dividing belongings. I was convinced Michael wouldn't take care of the sofa, and I had words with him and he had words with me. And then a few years later at my wedding, there were more words. And soon there was no relationship that we had or that I wanted. And decades went by with our not speaking. Then one day when I was 65, a friend tells me a story of two prisoners who had been horribly abused by their jailers. And one prisoner said to the other, "Have you forgiven the jailer, your jailer?" And he said, "No, I haven't." And then the prisoner said, "I have, but if you haven't, you're still in prison." I don't know what about that story impacted me, but just like that, I decided that I wanted to reach out to my brother, Michael. It wasn't that I wanted to forgive him. It was, I said to myself, I'm 65 years old then. I've been mad at my brother for 40 years. It's time to move on. And I think that one of the chores we have to do as we get older is to look at at relationships that have been torturous or bothersome and that we've ruminated over, and to say, can I move on from them? Because they don't provide us with help or happiness. And often what I discovered is that my perspective at 65 or 70 is different than my perspective when I was younger. So I visited my brother Michael, and he wasn't the ogre that I remembered. I saw the blue sofa. It was sitting in his living room, covered by an Afghan that my mom had crocheted. And I looked at that crushed blue velvet, white French provincial sofa and knew that I would never have kept that sofa for 40 years. He had been a good steward of my mother's things. I had been wrong about how he would take care of them. When I got home, I reread some of the letters we'd exchanged, and I ached with my young arrogance and judgmentalism. I would not have said or reacted today the way I reacted then. Maybe that's what maturity teaches us. I can't say that Michael and I will ever be close. We are very, very different, and there's a lot of water under the bridge. But I'm no longer angry. And after I got back, I looked at research about sibling estrangement. It may surprise you that 8 to 10% of siblings are estranged. We're a quiet group. When you talk about lovely vacations you took with your family, we just change the subject. We don't talk about the relationships we no longer have. And as many as 25% of people are estranged from a family member, not just siblings, parents, and adult children. And so we're a sizable group and we carry it with us. And one of the things the article said is that it's so often reconciliations don't work because no one is willing to take the responsibility for what happened. And I disagree with that. Well, I disagree that it's necessary to take responsibility for what happened. I think that can be a slippery slope. Michael and I never talked about the past. We simply moved on with the present. So maybe ending estrangement doesn't require accepting blame. Maybe it says we're not in the blame game. We're just ready to move on. I'm glad I did. It makes my present and it makes my future a lot healthier to not have that bad relationship in my present. I'm glad it's behind me. I'm glad I reached out.
Margaret, I have a question for you.
Yes.
We know, we see a lot of times people focus on the specific floor plan, like I've got to have this floor plan. And really, it's not about the floor plan, but it's about living in community and having purpose. And talk a little bit, did you struggle with that too in your challenge? Or
I
talk about a little
didn't.
bit seeing other people focus on the floor plan, and when they move, they really realize it's not about the floor plan, but being in the community.
I have seen people get very, I'm going to use the word stuck on a particular layout or floor plan. Sometimes it's to house a certain piece of furniture. That's more common than actually the way they live. I know in the cottage that we took, there had been a very large built-in that the flooring was done around. So all of a sudden we were saying we're going to have to work around that footprint or redo all of that flooring. And we chose not to do that. And we worked around the footprint. We move from homes that we often use just a few rooms in: the bedroom, the kitchen, the family room. but often there was a desk in one bedroom, and we try to put furniture that fit in a suburban home in multiple different rooms into a new home where things may have to be together but don't necessarily work well together. And I think if we get less stuck on our existing furniture and the floor plan we need to have, we find that once we get used to what we do have, instead of our needing what we used to have. You know, I had a strange learning recently, because I think we all have at this point in our lives a personal narrative of what we're like and what we like, what we have to have. And I was a person that hated hats, hated them. And no matter how cold it was in the winter, I never wore a hat. And suddenly last year, I started wearing hats in the winter, and I love how warm my head is. And the issue isn't about hats. It's how did I go from someone I was so sure of, I was so sure of what I needed to have or couldn't tolerate. How did I change? Why did I change? I'll never know, except that my narrative of what I needed to have clearly was evolving. And I've just accepted that I'm still evolving and still changing. And I get used to something new, and suddenly it seems like I've always been there. It really is about the community and about purpose and connection. Not that you won't love your home, but your home is only one part of your life, because your broader home is where you live, is the community you live in.
Margaret, tell the story too. You told me about how you and your husband used to eat on coffee,
That's right.
those little trays, and then you went to the dining room, and how that changed your life a little bit, and the insight you had from
It
that.
did. It was one of the changes we never expected. When I'm not a cook, I'm actually a horrible cook, but my husband is a great cook. And every day when I was working, I would come home from dinner, and we would watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, and Bill would have made dinner, and we would eat it in the living room watching TV. And I didn't think anything of this. It was just what we did until we moved to a community. And then every night we went to supper, we went to dinner, and instead of watching TV, we talked to people. We laughed, we met new people, we had dinner with people who then became friends. It was way better than watching TV during dinner. I think dining is something that you're meant to do with other people, and the community makes that possible.
I agree.
So that
100%.
was totally unexpected. And that's the part about living in community. There are things that you anticipate, but there are things that there are benefits you don't even know you're missing, because it's hard to visualize them without visualize those benefits without living in the community.
And any tips for us how to make that transition? Because we know our things hold us back, and it's very overwhelming to start getting rid of things and making that move. Any tips to make it easier?
I do. I mentioned there are many, many books and lists on the internet about downsizing. And certainly, please feel free to read those books and to look at lists. But for a lot of people, lists and books don't do the trick. There's just too much emotionality, or they don't know where to begin. There are move managers around the country who can help you. And one of the things I realized is that I looked at my own experience with exercise. And bear with me, and I'll explain what I mean. When the pandemic hit, I wanted to get exercise. So I began looking at YouTube videos geared for older adults. And there was Pilates, and there was yoga, and there were lots of things I could do. But the fact is, I did none of them. I just couldn't get traction with adhering to them. And then last October, a friend told me about a virtual cohort personal training group where she and 3 other people all shared the expense of a personal trainer and did virtual training. So I tried it and it works for me. We laugh. Instead of having people that are grinning as they exercise, we grunt and groan. We laugh, we talk, we're connected. And instead of having a free YouTube video that I could watch anytime, I now have a set time of day that I have to spend money on. But I don't feel bad. I don't feel like I failed at using YouTube. I feel proud that I succeeded in doing exercise that works for me. And I've thought about people who may be challenged with downsizing and saying to themselves, I'm looking at the list, I read books, it's not working for me. Please don't feel bad about using downsizing professionals to help you. I'm reaching my goals and I'm proud of that. And if you're hiring someone to help you have accountability and structure, helps you meet your goals, it may be the best investment in your self-esteem and your reaching goals that you can make. So it's sort of a paradigm switch. Not that that's the only way I can do it, but that look how wise I am. I found something that works for me. That's how I'm interpreting my exercise program. And I encourage you, that's how you can interpret working with a move manager.
I think the other thing too is sometimes when my parents transitioned from their big home to a cottage at a retirement community, my mom was overwhelmed and she was blocking out a whole day or half a day to work on projects. And then she wasn't meeting that and it was making her feel bad and defeated. So what I told her, I said, block out a half an hour each day and work in a specific room. And if you have energy and you want to go longer, great. But when you meet that goal of half an hour or 15 minutes, it makes you feel good versus when you block out the whole day and then you don't last the whole time.
Rick, I absolutely agree. Many people start thinking about this with months or even years in advance, but don't really get started and do it. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And the best way to look at downsizing is what you can do every day. Even making what seems like a modest goal, I'm going to get rid of 1 bag of stuff a week out of my house. I don't mean regular trash, things that leave your house. And you might say, you wouldn't notice 1 bag leave my house. Well, I might not. Just as if someone had 100 pounds to lose, I might not notice if they lose 1 pound. But do you know how you lose 100 pounds? You lose 1 pound 100 times. And if you had 1 bag leave your home a week, at the end of a year, that would be 52 bags. And I bet I would notice that. So for many people, slow and steady is what gets this done. It does not have to be overwhelming. And often people start talking about the most emotional thing in their home and why they can't get rid of that as the beginning of their downsizing. And I want to say, don't deal with the most emotional thing in your home. Leave that to the very end. You have enough things that aren't emotional that you can work on. Someone was telling me they have a box of the things their kids made in kindergarten, and that's why she can't downsize. And I'm going, what about the other 50 boxes of things that have nothing to do with your kids and kindergarten? So don't focus on what is really hard for you. Go after low-hanging fruit so you can build up success and confidence and feel that you can get this done. And do this work in little chunks. It does not have to overwhelm your life.
And I think, the pile theory is really good. A pile I'm going to keep, a pile I'm going to get rid of, a pile for my kids to come and pick up. And if they don't pick it up, it's gone. And then the other pile to relook at those 3 piles again. So it
And
helps.
that's okay. There'll be some postponed decisions, and that's okay, as long as those piles keep getting smaller. But you know, Rick, there's something I used to I've heard a lot, and that is people would say, this is too good to donate. And it's odd that we think something could be too good to donate. I remember I was doing a program at a library once, and a young woman stood up and said, I have 3 children and my husband is unemployed, and I shop at a thrift store, not because it's cool, it's what we need to do right now. And she said, you would be aghast at the condition of some of the things that people think are appropriate to donate. Shirts with big stains under the arms, or sweaters that are completely pilly. And she said, just because I shop at a thrift store doesn't mean I don't need to have self-respect. And that so impacted me, because I think that is how some people think that, oh, this is stained or torn, I'll give it to a thrift store. Thrift stores, for the most part, have to sell the things that you donate to them, and they make money that then supports a good cause. So the question isn't, is it bad enough to donate? It should be, is it good enough to donate? There is nothing that is too good to donate. And people that buy things in thrift shops are delighted at the bargains they have found, and they are picking something they really want. So I hope people look at donation with a more generous eye. People need self-respect, and I think it's our job when we pick out things for donation to help them have that. Donating isn't, is it usable? Is it sellable? And those are 2 different concepts. Something can be usable, but it may not be sellable. And in most cases, that means it can't be donated.
It is amazing how our things hold us back, and I deal with that also, and that going through this process of moving from a home, one home to another, is very tough. But people go through this and they get through it, and there are resources in our organizations to help you as much as you want, hold your hand. But it is challenging. It is very tough.
Well, you know, I love the quote from Catherine Graham. She wrote, she was the editor-in-chief of the Washington Post, and she had written her memoirs. And she starts one chapter with the statement, I think that moving is like childbirth. If anyone remembered how hard it was, they would never do it a second time. Well, no one, when you move to Woodcrest Villa, you're not going to have a baby. But like childbirth, it ends. Moving is hard, there's no question. But if you have children and you were raising those kids, you didn't say, oh, don't do something if it's hard. Lots of things that are worth doing are hard, but they're worth doing. And we've lived our lives. At this point in our lives, we've all done things that are hard, and we got through on the other side. We're pretty resilient. So the fact that it's hard doesn't mean it's not worthwhile, and doesn't mean that it's not doable. And that's a lesson that most of us have lived our lives by. We've done things that are hard. So this is where you're going to thrive. Please don't let your things be an obstacle to thriving, because we're too important for that. And our future lives and thriving and being with people and making connections and having experiences is too important to let things stand in the way.
You know, we've been doing a lot of talking here. Is there any questions from the audience? If you don't feel comfortable raising your hand, there's always the chat on the corner. You can ask a question.
I guess we've covered everything.
Oh, no, there was a question here. We got a
Oh, good.
question. Was there conflict with your spouse when you talked about downsizing?
Was there conflict?
Great question,
No,
Ann.
no, there wasn't. But we found ways to laugh. My husband called me up and said, you won't miss it. And I said, I won't miss what? And he said, you won't miss what I just got rid of. And I said, what did you just get rid of? And he said, I'm not telling you, you won't miss it. And I never missed anything. So I don't know if he really got rid of things and I didn't miss them, or if he was just doing that to torture me, in which case he succeeded. We found ways to laugh. One day, Bill put out a big fan on our driveway with a sign saying free. We lived in a neighborhood where people often did that. And I said to him, Bill, that fan doesn't work. And he said, I know, but it was the best fan we ever owned. I'm not mechanical. Maybe someone mechanical will get it and they're able to fix it. And a few minutes later, we hear a car door slam and the fan is gone. And my husband says, see? But 5 minutes after that, we heard a car door slam again and the fan was back. And I said, see, we did not have friction when we were moving.
So,
And we did find a lot of reasons to laugh.
so we see a lot in couples and relationships. One person wants to move and one doesn't. I saw it in my own parents. And my mom and I had some words. She didn't want to move. Afterwards, she said, what was I thinking? I should have moved sooner. Did you kind of have that experience with your husband?
No, we were both
You're both ready.
pretty set on moving. We were moving to something. We were moving to a lifestyle that we both wanted so we could easily leave, take vacations, and lock and go. We were, as I said, we downsized our belongings so we could upsize our lives. And I like the juxtaposition of those two words, but I like looking at living in senior living as upsizing my life, because that's what it was.
Yeah, it really allows you to do the things you love and you're passionate about. I know my mom would feel guilty about reading and not cleaning, but now she has someone cleaning for her and she can read more books and she still has 8 books she's working on and doesn't
You
have
know
the
what I love? Just yesterday, we looked and saw water at the bottom of the hot water heater. So I went and called up maintenance, and in less than 6 minutes, they were at our cottage. They looked at the hot water heater and said, it's got a small leak and it's from 2009. So it's lived its normal lifetime. We'll have a new hot water heater for you in 2 days. And I just loved being able to do that. That's one of the joys of living in a community, not having to take care of those things.
Any other questions? Okay, well, last week we heard about real estate and the importance of having a good realtor and helping you even during good times like we're going through right now. We're also seeing a lot of people sell their homes right now and moving into places. And like at Woodcrest, we have options for you here. It might not be the floor plan you want, but it's something you can move into and wait while you wait for that ideal floor plan. Or like Margaret said, it's not always about the floor plan, but about being in community.
One thing I did want to add, Rick, sometimes when people are waiting for an exact floor plan, a community offers them a different scenario and says, when the move in now, so you can enjoy our lifestyle, have the security of our healthcare offering, and when the floor plan that you want becomes available, you can move into that. And people will say, oh, that's 2 moves, it'll be horrible. As someone who worked with hundreds of people who did this, it is not 2 whole moves and it is not horrible. 50% of the people who did this ended up saying they liked where they moved into and they weren't going to bother to change. And the other 50% decided they were going to move to the new floor plan. It wasn't a big deal because they were already in the community. So if you get this kind of suggestion from marketing staff, please know that all of the people we worked with who did this, and there were hundreds, ended up saying it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't 2 whole moves, and they were glad they did. No one said, I wish I had stayed in my home and waited for that other floor plan. That's what I mean by Plan B. It's a
Yeah.
good plan.
And I think the other thing too, the experts that we have, BA, Lori, Amy, Kathy, they have walked with people on these journeys, and they're here to help you as much as you need and talk through scenarios and options. So, feel free to give them a call. They've got lots of solutions. They're just a phone call away. And there's also some incentives right now for 1-bedrooms and studios. So give them a holler. Next week, I'll be talking about right sizing. So we'll be talking a little bit about thinking how you live in your space and thinking about how we live in community. So I look forward to, that's something I'm passionate about. I have lived in 500 square feet, and at the end, we'll do a case study on my house, showing how you live in space. Now it's just Kitty and me, but we make it work, and I feel comfortable in small spaces. But part of that comes from living in New York City and Chicago in a city, and living in high rises. So I'm used to that, but I'll share those stories with you next week, and stories with my own family, my parents moving from a horse farm in the country to a retirement community and living in communities. So thank you for being here today. Just a reminder, if you attend all 4 of these seminars, we put your name in for a drawing for 2 tickets to the Fulton Opera Theater. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for being here. Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Rick. Bye-bye.
Bye.